Welcome to our webinar, Fleet Electrification and Total Cost of Ownership, Building the Case for EVs in a Post-Incentive Era. My name is Steph Wagner, Senior Program Associate with the Electrification Coalition, and today we'll be diving into cost-effective ways to electrify your fleet. So we will first get into a refresher on who we are at the EC, followed by talking about those cost-effective procurement strategies, along with leveraging financing and as-a-service strategies, followed by Drive EV fleets, and then a fireside chat with the Village of Oak Park, Illinois, and then some resources, webinars, and then we'll close out. If we have a little bit of time at the end, we can take some audience questions, but we'll see when we get there. So that said, let's move in. Alrighty. For those of you who are new or need a refresher, the Electrification Coalition is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that works to accelerate the widespread adoption of light, medium, and heavy-duty electric vehicles to overcome the economic, public health, and national security challenges that have long stemmed from the U.S.'s dependence on oil, which is a very timely subject for many of you. Our efforts focus on policy development, advocacy campaigns, consumer education, freight and fleet electrification, the cultivation of bipartisan support, charging infrastructure planning, EV supply chain development, and coalition building. On the next slide, you can see some of our impact throughout the states and local governments. In providing technical support and our advocacy work, the EC has made a positive impact on vehicle electrification efforts across the country on a variety of subjects. For example, through the local infrastructure hub, the Charging Smart program, and of course, our very own Drive EV fleets. And now let's get into procurement strategies here. So first and foremost, there is cooperative bid procurement. This is a competitive bid agreement by a public entity that leverages market demand to lower the purchase price of goods and services. Why this is important is because historically, traditional requests for proposals or RFPs are those types of bid solicitations can be for EVs and charging stations. These have relied heavily, most vendors, especially when you're talking about municipalities and state governments, they rely heavily on this RFP process to coordinate and get that local vendor participation. Leaning into cooperative bid procurement grants access to competitive pricing while allowing you, the solicitor, to review contracts and approach the vendors that will fit your fleet's needs best or a particular project best. Leasing, on the other hand, is a more typical approach for cost-effective fleet procurement and varies depending on the agreed-upon leasing structure. Next, the as-a-service, where a fleet utilizes a third-party entity, which we'll get into this and a little bit more in the later slides. And lastly, here on this particular section is going through your local green bank or your community development financial institution or CDFI to receive low-cost loans or leasing for EVs and charging projects. You may think, why would I get a lease from this green bank? For those of you who are familiar with working through that or a CDFI for EVs or charging infrastructure, there's a little bit more value than you would think in that sense. So that said, this is a great option for those cases where ultimately all of these options that are listed on the slide truly depend on a case-by-case scenario for each fleet and its goals. Planning with TCO or total cost of ownership in mind, while the price difference between EVs and internal combustion engines, or otherwise known as your typical gas or diesel car, continues to whittle down to roughly that $2,000 to $5,000 price point and dropping, TCO has remained heavily EV favored for nearly a decade now, and that's hard to believe, and often reaching net savings within that 2 to 4 year vehicle operation range, depending particularly as gasoline or diesel cars experience more wear and tear, thus increasing maintenance and repair expenses over time. And those of you who are fleet folks in the crowd or in your budget department, you're very well see those vehicles that are just ran to the ground and how expensive that is to replace. Other key factors for driving long-term cost efficiency in a fleet when you're deciding on your procurement strategy include, first and foremost, targeting the vehicles with the longest mileage users that are the longest mileage users in that sense. So every electric mile driven results in cost savings. Basically, the more the EV is driven, the more comparative cost savings because it doesn't have those running, moving parts that a typical ICE vehicle would have. Second, there's charging infrastructure planning, which can never happen too early. Planning out your charging needed both now and in the future mitigates pauses in deployment, even if installing conduit ready for EV expansion in the future. This also means informing your utility company, whether that is a public or private entity, what have you, well in advance and meeting with the right departments and leadership for that sign off. Being sure that there's no hiccups in that process is very critical in that entire planning process. So, lastly, the second to last piece I'll mention here includes those light duty vehicles in particular, actually. So these, for those of you who are aware, they have remained significantly cost competitive, whereas that medium and heavy duty options, that market for electric vehicles continues to grow in offerings. But as for light duty electrification, this will continue to yield immediate cost savings over the coming years. This is a great place, especially if you're starting out, to really get into it because it's built for that. And it also is a great place to continue growing your fleet electrification efforts as well. All right, and lastly, for this section, focus on what works best for your fleet. Is there any preferred make or model that your fleet may prefer or your department may prefer? Are there any vehicle applications that have a very niche use case, such as a utility or maintenance trucks? These are some of the many factors to keep in mind as you coordinate this type of work. All right. And for our next section here, I see some comments in the audience of not seeing slide progression. Because this is through Microsoft Teams, you're actually able to look through the slides yourself. I recommend keeping up with me. And so there's a sync button at the bottom left of your screen. This will allow you to stay in live time with me. So on the next slide, on to 6. Here is a very simple decision tree, starting with identifying vehicles for procurement and comparing options. For outright purchase, leveraging cooperative bid procurement through Sourcewell, a state contract, or another similar source allows you to take advantage of lower pricing for set-aside vehicles, which means less competition with the consumer market. And this usually expedites this is typically an expedited route over the standard RFP, or as mentioned before, request for proposal process, or RFI, or request for information process. Fleet and charging financing options such as leasing. This allows you to spread the capital over a longer term, minimizing upfront expenses. This was, of course, a very popular approach during the first EV tax credit, for those of you who are familiar, allowing for pass-through from the automotive dealer to the city, state, whoever may be purchasing that vehicle or procuring that vehicle. For some fleets, this option, being able to go through that leasing, is like muscle memory. And for those of you who aren't as familiar, it's worth exploring to see if that works within your budget cycle, etc. And next here is as a service. These types of offerings, as mentioned before, allow third-party vendors to manage upkeep and operations of the vehicles and or chargers. It can feel like a closed-end lease for those of you who are familiar, where the third party maintains ownership of the vehicles or charging infrastructure throughout the duration. For example, the charging vendor, the city would agree to provide public-owned land to the vendor to install, operate, and maintain the charging stations for either the fleet, the public use, or a combination of both, depending on the project and what agreement you would like out of it. What is the ultimate goal of that project? This, of course, is a good option for spreading the specific monthly premium over the duration of vehicle deployment, and in the idea of bundling the vehicles and charging infrastructure together so that there's no lag time in between, no sudden need for a change or plan shift in that sense. It also essentially contracts out maintenance, removing another factor of upkeep from the fleet operator's worry. As mentioned before, it depends on a case-by-case scenario for what works best for you and your fleet. If you ever want to make that decision, later in the slides, we'll get into a little bit more of that. But for now, if you would like more information, please check out the procurement decision tree on the EC's procurement hub for a breakdown of these various decision flows. And in the chat, we should be sending that through, and we will then follow up these slides later on with additional information. All right, next here, we have leveraging financing and as a service. So getting more into that piece. For entities like green banks, they can act as a partner. So offering low interest rates for vehicle financing. It's always worth contacting your local green bank or CDFI to have a better understanding of your options for certain projects. For example, did you apply for a federal funding program that your project included EVs and or charging infrastructure, but weren't awarded? You can always reuse that proposal if it was denied and then pitch it to your green bank or CDFI. This is always an option to really be able to reuse that idea, rekindle that spirit that was behind that proposal, and continue making progress. There's no reason to not do that. That said, the Green Bank 50 network, good friends of the EC, is glad to connect you with one of these entities or institutions. Reach out today to learn more about your financing options in your state. Next here, we'll talk more about the Drive tool, or rather the Drive EV Fleets program. As I've alluded to, the Drive EV Fleets is a collaboration between the EC and Sourcewell, forming a resource hub for fleets of all sorts at any stage of their vehicle electrification journey. If you look at the QR code, or if you look at the chat, this is a direct link to that website where, again, there's plenty of resources there that I'll get into in a moment. So for this, with our partnership with Sourcewell and them contracting out, all contracts with vendors have been freshly renewed for 2026 and are available to all public and nonprofit entities, including schools. Check out the available contracts and resources today with the link that is in the chat. And of course, there's additional resources that I mentioned on this slide as well that we provide to fleets that are at any point in their journey, like mentioned before. With over 55 agreements in place, of course, the most ever, I will also note, in terms of our partnership with Sourcewell over the several years. There's options across EVs, charging infrastructure, and related services. So I encourage all of you to check it out today. And if you ever want the EC to walk you through the next steps to sign up as a member, it is very much free. You can still take advantage of the savings today, even if you don't have an existing membership. Okay, And now we will get into our next section where we'll be chatting with Ken Crowley, Superintendent of Fleet Services for the Village of Oak Park in Illinois, responsible for a fleet of over 250 vehicles with a variety of use cases. Oak Park's fleet is currently over 10% electrified and counting, with telematics in most of the fleet to track and right size its vehicles for future replacement. Ken, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so jumping right into it, what are the EVs, hybrids, plug-in hybrids in your fleet right now? How did you go about procuring them? Is there anything that's helpful to know for the folks that are joining us today?
Get to know your local dealers, get to know the manufacturers, make contacts, because that helped us a lot. When we first, we have Nissan Leafs, Ford E-Vans, Chevy PP police pursuit vehicles, Blazers, and one Chevy Equinox. And when we first purchased them, we used leasing. Then when COVID hit, it was the wild, wild west. It was every man for himself. So it was whatever you could find. And now we're going off of co-ops. My local dealer has our local state contract. He's the one I bought the Blazers from. And we don't currently use any plug-in hybrids. We found as far as municipalities go, we had issues with our old bi-fuel Cavaliers. They ran in CNG and gasoline. And if you give them the choice, they'll only use gas. So if it's more of an enthusiast vehicle or commuter. And if it's somebody that wants to use it, as opposed that is supposed to be using it, they're just looking for a vehicle to get them back and forth and be able to do their job. But yeah, they've definitely been I won't say everybody, but almost everybody has something that's perfect for an EV. There's something in the fleet that this case will work. It's some of them are perfect vehicles. I'm only 4.7 square miles, so I'm ideally looking at vehicles with the smaller batteries to save money. Nissan has two options, a 40 kilowatt and a 60 kilowatt for their Leafs. And the majority of my early ones were all 40 kilowatts, and they're perfect. We don't charge about maybe once a week, if that. And my most recent purchases were 60 kilowatt, only because the 40s were unavailable at the time. And the manufacturer came up with a $16,000 rebate from the manufacturer. So I bought the 60 kilowatts less than I bought the 40 kilowatts from 4 years previously.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a great example of just having great relations with your dealer, the OEM. Yeah, it's those types of thinking, depending on the fleet, it may feel like it is outside the box, but it is good to see those types of relationships. And it's just a great example there. So on our next question here, what efforts have helped acclimate departments to EVs and charging? Was there any initial resistance? And if so, how did you approach it?
I only had one person that was resistant, but she was resistant to anything that wasn't her 2005 Ford Crown Vic. She just liked the old technology, and our parking was at a premium for our municipal vehicles and people's personal vehicles. So when you gave them the option of dedicated parking, there was a line to drive the EVs because, oh, I have a dedicated spot. And once they got over it and they got used to it and didn't have it, they wrote, oh, it's just like driving a car, because it is. But now that dedicated spot is now shared. We had to start doubling up on our spots in order to expand the fleet because our infrastructure is only so big. So I'm kind of at a standstill at the moment. I'm waiting until they make some decisions with possibly a new police station and possibly rebuilding our village hall before they're willing to put more infrastructure in.
Gotcha. Yeah, the logistics behind just broadly the city planning and yeah, wanting that to be in lockstep um with just charging and development over time. That's another great example of that in particular. And it's good to hear that, yeah, it's just a matter of regarding the question itself, it's good to hear that and this is true for a lot of folks that have taken surveys over time. even on the consumer level of sometimes they just attend a ride and drive event or National
Yeah.
Drive Electric Week.
Mhm.
They get a feeling. They either ride in that vehicle or actually get to drive it, and it's just it comes fluid, or they're immediately signed on. Like, where can I get one?
Yeah, most of the new employees that are put in them, we have a one pager, a little pamphlet that's how to charge it, how to drive it, how to operate it. We had
Awesome.
to look up how to put it in neutral for the car wash. And once they get in it, we just do an initial test drive and a little bit of training, and then they're like, oh, once the intimidation factor wears off, it's second nature.
Exactly. Nothing to it but that. Excellent. So on our next question here, were there any rebates or incentives that you took advantage of during procurement? You mentioned one that was actually through the dealership slash OEM, but
Yeah.
were there any others?
Oh, yeah. Our local municipality, ComEd, had, depending upon where you operate them for fleets, $5,000 or $7,500 rebate. The federal clean vehicle credit became available to municipalities. I want to say after
Mhm.
2024, after I bought half of my EVs. And
Yeah.
now we're kind of in line for the possibility of 158,000 in rebates for a lot of the EVs we bought. And that can be up to $7,500, or I think it's 20 or 30% of the vehicle. And some of my Leafs were so inexpensive, it's not even the full 7,500. So
Right.
yeah, we look for every rebate we can. My small battery Leafs, I think were 4,900 rebates the first few years. Then they went to 5,000. And then I think it was 6 or 7,000. And then it was 16,000 that I said for the larger batteries, for the most recently fleet rebates, in addition to the ComEd, in addition to the federal rebate. And then when I sold my cars this last year, I actually was selling 2027 Ford Fusion hybrids. The amount of money I made off those, I actually made money on every single purchase. I wish every year was like
Wow.
that. This was an anomaly. But my finance department called my boss saying, why aren't we spending any money on that account? He says, it's going out and it's going in. Yes, yes, we are using it. I
That's
wish every year
awesome.
was like that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's just very smart decision making in terms of trying to uh yeah, replace vehicles that are just it's a timely option, or if there's just still residual depreciation on it that can be just then used to purchase more EVs. It's a
Yeah,
great example of that in
yeah,
particular. And it's awesome to hear that you guys were able to stack those incentives on not only the utility side, but also like federal as well. So that's just another great example of being able to really cut down in budget and just be smart in the opportunities that arise. Out of curiosity, have you, I feel like we talked about it in the past, in our past conversation. Were you able to use any cooperative bid agreements like Sourcewell in the past? Or was it
yeah.
just, go
I
ahead.
bought from our Northwest Municipal Conference is what I buy my regular squad cars
Fabulous.
off of. And that operator has the Ford EV van contract as well as the Chevy police pursuit vehicle Blazer contract. So I
Wow.
bought those from him. The Nissans, it was easier and better for us to contact the manufacturer fleet director directly. And then he let me know what dealers in the area had um, vehicles that met my specs.
Gotcha. And you've listed all vehicles that are very competitive, not only in the consumer market, but also in the fleet market. So being to highlight that again to folks that are tuning in, it tends to be very advantageous to go through these cooperative big procurements because these are effectively vehicles that are set aside for your procurement, for your use. It's something that needs to be utilized more often. So it's awesome to hear an example of that exactly. So in our next question here, what kind of cost savings are you seeing since switching some of those vehicles to electric? Were they more, less, or about what you expected?
They're about what we expected. The what's saving us a lot is the downtime because they don't have to come
Right.
in as often. even with high mileage. Rotating tires is still the same. I don't care if it's ice or electric. Taking the wheels off, making sure they're good. The wipers still wear out. You know, a light bulb might go here and there, but no oil changes. And since the price of the vehicles were very close to on par or less than ICE with rebates, the return on investment was from day one on most of my EVs. My Blazers are take homes for my police chief, deputy chief, and I think chief of detectives, and they live 45 miles away. So they're going to pay for themselves within 2 years. There's a $11,000 difference between the Blazer EV and the Ford Explorer hybrid that we purchased. And with the no maintenance, or almost no maintenance, and the savings on fuel, it's, like I said, the Blazers are going to pay for themselves within 2 years.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Out of curiosity, and this is going a little bit off script here, so bear with me. I was curious because we didn't talk about that before either, of whether the city has, or rather the village, excuse me, has a sort of a take-home policy that reimburses, or like how does that work for that policy?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. My police chief asked me if I was going to install an electric charger in her garage. And I said, when I gave you a gas vehicle, did I put a gas pump in your garage? She said, no. As long as the vehicles have the rating and the distance, it's not a problem. The vehicles fully charged go about 300, 350 miles. And there's a level 2 charger where she parked her ICE vehicle. So she comes into work, pulls in place, plugs it in, it charges all day while she's there. Level 2 tops it off, and she drives. And if she is low at home, she has the ability, 1 block away from her home is a level 2 at a hospital. And she said, I have to pay for it. I said, I will pay 15 cents a kilowatt hour all day long over gallons of gasoline. No problem. You can charge it there exclusively and I'll still be happy.
There you go. There you have it. Yeah, and that feeds great into my next question of, given the small size of the village, have you had any concern with range? It sounds like no, but just to ask, do you find that the base models for most EVs in your fleet have more than enough range for typical use cases?
Oh, yeah, we're a perfect example of where EVs are designed for. Stop and go traffic, 4.7 square miles, mostly are my inspectors. My water meter tech drives a van for our water department. Our animal control officer has one for picking up animals and going to appointments. The smaller batteries are fine. As I said, with the smaller battery leaves, they don't have to charge but once every week or so, if that. Um, I would like some with larger ranges because we do send people to training and we have to stick them in a hybrid. Just if you're going over a certain amount of miles, there's a lot of intrepidation still about, will the charger be working when I get there? The
Better get
Blazers,
ready.
yeah, my Blazers have been great. We've had some people go out of town to training with those, but they are the exception and they're their take home. So they're used to them. They're very intimate with them. The other vehicles, they're pool cars and the people only drive them in town short hops. So they're not comfortable with them going long distance. So we stick them in a hybrid, either Maverick or a Fusion. And I would love to change all of mine over, but I don't have the infrastructure yet.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
still
it's a
need a
matter of time.
few hybrids. Yeah, so eventually.
Yeah, and it's always that case, like you mentioned before, of being able to sell those hybrids or the gas vehicles that are currently in the fleet and then recoup that cost to
Mhm.
be able to pull it in. So that's another great example of just being able to do what you can to meet the goals of the village as a government, but also to still remain in operation successfully.
Right. Mhm.
So thank you for that. That's awesome. So you mentioned a little bit about that take-home policy. Are there any other policies that have helped facilitate further fleet electrification?
As far as policies goes, nothing is mandated with us, other than do the best we can, what we have, and make it as clean as we can. I can say some tools that have helped us. Telematics has been great. And then also coming up with a procedure or policy for charging. We developed an odd even charging. So there's odd cars and even cars. Odd ones charge on odd days, even one charge on even days. So we can double our vehicles with the same size infrastructure we currently have. But we aren't mandated anything. This way we say you find something that runs on peanut butter. We can go down that route. We aren't locked into one technology. We've tried, we run biodiesel, we've tried CNG, electric and ice. And so there's no silver bullet, and it's nice not being locked into one.
Keeping your options open, at least for the time being, as the market develops more, especially in like the medium and heavy duty areas for that type of fleet side. Yeah, awesome response there.
Thank you.
So out of curiosity, how, as we lead into our last questions for this section, how do residents feel about the new change in the fleet? Do they feel anything in particular about these new vehicles?
We have a really large resident group that drives EVs, and there's at least 5 or 6 on my block alone. I'm not one, but I like stick shift. Sorry. They don't really notice. They just see village vehicles. We do label all our EVs as electric on the back, so people see it. They like it. We've had one complaint, and that was in 2019 when we first put the chargers up at Village Hall, because a resident complained that, why are you wasting our tax dollars on something that's just a fad? We're like, well, we're sorry you feel that way, sir. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Lo and behold.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we're trying to toot our own horn. We're trying to advertise as much as we can of what we're doing to clean the environment and save fiscal dollars. But they just see vehicles and employees going about doing their jobs. And if it's completely smooth and not noticed, that means it's working.
Exactly.
So that's a good thing.
And some studies showed as well that seeing more EVs in neighborhoods, especially owned by neighbors, that can also facilitate more of that interest, less of that hesitance towards something new.
Right.
So for a city or municipal fleet to do that, it just encourages more of that curiosity more. So that's awesome to see.
Thank you.
Yeah. And my last question for you in this section is, what do you look forward to seeing in the future US EV market?
Essentially 3 things. Larger batteries, because the majority of the public is, or much bigger distance, longer distance. The majority of the public buys the vehicle for the 0.1% of the time that they might be going to visit an uncle 3 states away, not the 99.9% of the time where they're not driving over 20 or 30 miles. Faster charging. Once we're at the point that the normal charge is similar in time, maybe a few minutes longer than gassing up an ICE vehicle, that'll be a large hurdle. And it'll definitely help with emergency response. Us in the municipality side, we can't have something charging for a very long time during emergency events, police, fire. And then the last one is the infrastructure across the nation expanding and being reliable. My village, we operate a lot of level 2s. There are some private DC chargers. And I can say honestly, in Oak Park, we've had one down here and there. We're at least 90% up. But there are some places I've gone to where I see the chargers, like the cables are cut off or not working because nobody's paying. They don't understand just purchasing it is not sometimes the biggest cost. It's the maintenance program and the data program for collecting funds from it. That can sometimes be the holdback and why vehicles, chargers aren't still working. But yeah, just those 3 things, the longer distance, faster charging, and better infrastructure across the nation.
And it's a great thing that still research and development is occurring to do exactly that. It's especially gotten expedited in a huge race the past few years. So we're well in shape before 2030 on all those 3 fronts, especially in the larger EV batteries, and they're being from my view, a kind of a race in the past several years to have a more affordable EV at that as well, especially
Yes.
as battery research has proven to create more affordable since that takes up a chunk of the MSRP or the
Oh, yeah.
what you would pay at the dealership.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to in the coming years for a lot of folks, not only in the consumer market, but also for fleets across the nation.
Yeah, when you were saying that, like the kilowatt per hour battery, I mean, the difference between the 40 and the 60 kilowatt battery for Nissan is like $8,000 or $9,000. I mean, I could never justify like $9,000 for another 80, 100 miles in my size village. So it's nice that
Right.
they had the lower option for people that can use it.
And same on that front that a lot of major automakers in the US, they also offer fairly extensive battery warranties, but it's always,
Mhm.
proof is in the pudding. Any fleet or consumer should always read what the warranty covers, how many years, how many miles, etc. But yeah,
We have, in my 2019s, we have all noticed almost no degradation too, and we charge them up to 100% all the time. It was really a concern when we first got into it. Everybody was worried, oh, 8 or 10 years and the vehicle's gonna be junk because the battery's gonna go to hell. And that has not been the case. People have not noticed the degradation that we were possibly expecting.
right, exactly. And it's great that you say that as well because I do remember there was a study, I believe in the UK, or I believe it was utilizing vehicles across since 2018, 2019. It was more of an
Mhm.
international study where it showed exactly that from EVs that are absolutely 15 roughly, give or take years old, they still have pretty good batteries and very minimal degradation, if that. It truly hinges upon how well they were taken care of themselves, the batteries themselves, the vehicles themselves.
Just like an ICE
So
vehicle.
exactly. It's just it's just a slight mentality shift in that sense. Just knowing what procedures, what to do, what's best for that car, taking good care of it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of these responses. It was a great chat. And with that, I think we can move on to our following resources so that we can help those tuning in on how they can make progress in their own fleet electrification journey. Alrighty. So for stellar examples and case studies across a variety of topics, check out the Municipal Electrification Policy Playbook. To dig right into navigating financing options, your best bet is to look at the resources that are available in the EC Procurement Hub, like mentioned before. And lastly, to ring this bell a little bit more, check out driveevfleets.org or Sourcewell's website itself to view all available Sourcewell contracts along with additional resources. Those two are all in the chat right now for those who are tuning in. And the last resource I'll mention here that is coming soon, pairing nicely with this discussion today, is our latest case study coming out again very soon. This will highlight the following municipalities with EV procurement successes. In Iowa City, so right in the state of Iowa, where they implemented an EV first procurement policy leading to the state's very first fully electric patrol car. In Madison, Wisconsin, where they expanded charger build out in municipal parking garages, leading to more available in the local public locations for not only the fleet, but also for consumers, for just the residents nearby. In Portland, Oregon, they installed solar supported charging infrastructure to reduce expenses and make progress towards their overarching city goals. All of which involve different aspects to increasing fleet electrification and savvy procurement strategies to reduce long-term expenses, but also go towards the city's overall goals. We'll follow up with everyone here, like mentioned before, to debut the case study. But for now, on our next slide, we have quite a number of upcoming webinars, which will focus on freight electrification, discussing those topics involving medium and heavy duty charging infrastructure there, along with charging infrastructure financing. So talking about how municipalities if they're now doing that shift towards going from offering free charging at public locations to making a profit off of it. So to pull that money into their budget and procure either more EVs or maintain those chargers, etc. Learning more about how to charge for the charging infrastructure. And last but not least, we'll be doing a bigger deep dive into green banks, and we'll have much more to come on this. So sign up today on the EC's events calendar, which is in the comment section here. As a last plug, the EC's Veterans for EVs initiative rallies together our U.S. military veterans who support transportation electrification, turning the enthusiasm into an action network by discussing with legislators on issues regarding oil dependence, national security, and creating more American jobs in EV industries. The EC will be at this year's Government Fleet Expo and Conference, or GFX, for those who know. So if you see us, we'd be happy to chat more about Veterans for EVs initiative, fleet procurement, and much more, of course. So with that, we have a little bit of time left, so I'll open it up to a few audience questions. And if you can't think of any right now, you can always go to the email that's at the bottom of this slide at evfleets@electrificationcoalition.org. That is our direct email on driveevfleets.org to come with us for any questions. So I ask for anyone that has questions to put it in the chat so that we can go from there. The first question I saw to go through here, one states, are you aware of any turnkey EVSE installation cooperative bid agreements? So including design, permitting, that equipment, network software, installation, etc. Not just the procurement of the charging station, but to develop that full project. Yes, absolutely. Sourcewell has a variety of, you truly do have to look through their contracts where they do state what they earn, or what they provide to you. Normally they have phrases such as turnkey right in their contracts, so it's easy to actually see and look through contracts that way. You can also see in that information, since it's all public on Sourcewell's website for each of the vendors' sites. And in turn, driveevfleets.org does list off every single vendor so that you can be directed immediately to there if you don't want to search around in that sense. You can see directly how much that discount is off the bat. And there's also the opportunity, say, for example, if you are going to be procuring a medium and heavy duty vehicle, for instance, or simply a vehicle that requires upfitting, or if it has like a specific use case like a utility truck that I mentioned before, where you can actually double up or double dip, like mentioned before with federal and utility incentives, where you can double dip on those Sourcewell and or state contracts, what have you, for cooperative procurement. It's simply in that sense of making sure that you can coordinate with those vendors and be able to really show this is exactly what I want. These are the specs that is required for this use case. And yeah, communication is very essential in that regard. The next question I have here is, would there be interest in generating power independent of the grid? So how I'm interpreting this is more grid stability. And that is absolutely what EVs are leaning towards in terms of the next generation of technological innovation with vehicle to grid, or V2G, or V2X, it's sometimes called. That type of features and technology is, I would say, ongoing now with some vehicles. It's even some utility programs across the US have pilot or outright ongoing programs. My local utility company, BGE, offers such a program for vehicles, EVs that have that V2G feature where you can pay back what you use if that vehicle is being used to stabilize the grid in that sense. So absolutely, there's interest in doing that. There's an active effort in terms of having more national security for our grid. And I will look at the chat for any additional questions that I can answer here. If not, I believe we can call it there.